What is good, everybody? Welcome back to another video on the Forge, and today we're going to be going through the best races that you could possibly get in this game, from the worst to the top tier, the pinnacle, the ones that you want to be aiming for with the new codes, which I'll place on the screen right now. Go ahead and use them so you could get codes, and before you use them, finish this video to check out which races are actually the best. And if you already didn't know, previously I made a video on the ultimate crafting guide where you could get pickaxes, where to mine, what ores to get, and then which ores to use when you're crafting armor or weapons to get those passives, like my gauntlets right here. As you can see, it has 6 passives slash traits, and you could get even more just like my pants. So go check out that video if you need that guide. But without further ado, as always, if you guys want to help out the channel or you found this video helpful, go ahead and like, subscribe, and turn on the noties, and leave a comment on how your day is or just anything in general. It helps out a ton. It's free and I appreciate it so much. Now let's begin by heading on over to the tier list. So here is the tier list. We'll also be using the Forge wiki as well to show you guys all the passives that each race has, but currently there's around 13. We have the human, the elf, the zombie, the goblin, the undead, the orc, the dwarf, the shadow, the minotaur, the dragonborn, the golem, the angel, and the demon, all coming in at different rarities. And we're going to start off with the first race, which is human. Now keep in mind, this is just my opinion. If you guys have your own opinion or you think something is better than the other, leave it in the comments below and tell me why. So the first race, human, it comes in at a 25% chance of being rolled, and it is a common rarity, and only has one passive called the blessed, 3% luck and 3% experience. When you think about it, it's just a plus in general, but this is the most common race, and honestly, plus 3% to both luck and experience is not the biggest buff, so I'm gonna put that in D tier. The increases in luck and experiences is just so minimal that you shouldn't even bother with this race. After that, we have the elf race, coming in at a 15% chance of being pulled, and it is uncommon. It has 2 passives this time. The first one is glorious, plus 3% luck, and then the second one is superior genes, plus 15% stamina and 5% height. Now, I don't know if I'm wrong, correct me if I'm right, but I believe height, width, depth, and size increases your hitbox in whichever direction it's referring to. So I don't know if that's a plus, but in my opinion, that's kind of a debuff. Increasing your hitbox will just allow mobs to hit you a lot more often. And combat is like 30% of the game, 40% of the game, so that's kind of a downside in my opinion. In general, I wouldn't be aiming for the elf as well. It's one of the more common races and doesn't have the best buffs. The luck buff is minimal. The stamina buff is not great, especially if it's just by itself, and plus the height, you're not going to notice it that much. After that, we have the zombie race. It is the second uncommon race, coming in at a 14% chance of being pulled, and it has 3 passives: mutated genes, plus 2% health regen every 5 seconds, rotten, minus 25% max HP, and then absorb, 50% chance to convert incoming damage to health. Now this is better than the other 2, but only for combat and survivability. Like plus 2% health regen every 5 seconds, that's not too bad. Like at least you're able to get health regen passively, and you can just sit in the corner if you're low. So rotten, minus 25% max HP, we're bringing that down by a lot. That is really bad. Survivability and taking hits from reapers and knights and skeletons is going to deal so much damage that with this race you're going to have to rely on parrying. And then absorb, 50% chance to convert incoming damage to health. In my opinion, that's a lot better than converting it to damage because it gives you survivability. I'm going to put that in C tier above the other 2, but still I wouldn't be aiming for these ones down here. Now we're moving on to the rare races. The first one is goblin, coming in at a 10.5% chance, and it has 3 passives. The first one is sneaky, plus 15% movement speed and plus 10% dagger attack speed. The second one is tiny, minus 50% health and minus 15% size. And then the third one is bargain, plus 12% discount when shopping. Now that is what I'm talking about. This alone right here brings it up a couple tiers in my opinion, because there's a couple pickaxes in the game. I believe there's a vampire one or the demonic one that costs like 500,000 gold, which just decreases like the amount of gold by like 60,000, which is insane. But even when you're shopping like the arcane pickaxe, that's minus 10,000 gold. Just a small discount is going to help your bank account not hit 0, if you know what I'm trying to get at. Plus the 50% movement speed is pretty decent, allows you to move around the map a lot quicker. And then plus % dagger attack speed if you're maining dagger and you can only make weapons with a couple of ores. I mean, this is pretty decent. Other than that, the minus 15% health is not the best, really bad actually. And then minus 50% size, you're always going to be up close with the dagger because that's probably where you're going to main as a goblin. So this doesn't really matter in my opinion, even though it reduces your hitbox, I believe. So I'm going to put that above the zombie, but I'll put it up a tier. I'll put it up a tier just because of the discount when shopping, because I know for a fact, even though right now it might not be the best, in the future there's going to be a lot of items that cost so much gold and you're not going to be able to buy it without the goblin discount. Now the second rare race is the undead, coming in at a 9% chance of being pulled, and it has 3 passives called the second chance, refill 50% of your health when you're below 10%, has a 5-minute cooldown. My goodness. The second passive is fragile bones, minus 12% health, and then the third passive is sharp surface, reflect 10% of incoming damage. Now I have a couple of things I have to mention with this one. Sharp surface, I don't know if it can reflect damage and stop damage in general. If it doesn't stop damage, this is just horrible. Maybe it's good up against bosses in the future that deal a ton of damage, and if you hit them, reflecting 10% of the incoming damage will actually do a good amount of chunk. As of right now, I don't see a use for this. Fragile Bones, it's just a downgrade. Minus 12% max HP, that's horrible. And then Second Chance, like 50% of your health when it's below 10% is good, but like every 5 minutes, my goodness, I am not waiting that long. I'd rather just master how to parry and not get hit at all. So I'm putting this in C tier. And you know what? I might even put it below Zombie just because it has a 2% health regen every 5 seconds. And then if you take damage, you have a chance to get health. So I'm keeping Zombie above the Undead. Moving on, we have the Orc race. It is the last rare race coming in at an 8% chance, and it has 2 passives. The first one is Muscular, plus 10% physical damage and plus 50% health and plus 10% size. That's pretty good. And then the second one is Heavy, minus 10% stamina and minus 10% movement speed. That is kind of bad. So this is like a worse Golem and Minotaur. You'll see it later on, but the physical damage is good, the health is good, the size is not going to be too noticeable, it's only 10%, but the minus 10% stamina and movement speed is definitely going to be really noticeable if you're trying to be moving around the map. So I'll put that above Zombie just because if you learn how to parry, you don't need any health buffs, and I'd rather just take the physical buffs from the Orc race than the Zombie race. Now the first epic race is the Dwarf, coming in at a 7% chance of being obtained, and it has 3 passives called the Gifted Miner, plus 50% mining and 5% to better foraging. The second one is Critical Mining, plus 20% chance to deal 50% extra damage to rocks. And then the third one is Heavy Short, minus 20% height and minus 5% movement speed. Now this is a really good race. This is probably an A tier, S tier race, depending on how you play the game. And the reason why is because of the fact that you gain plus 50% mining and plus 5% better foraging. Like that alone right there accounts for 50% of the game, maybe even 60% of the game, because you're always crafting and you're always mining. And then you have Critical Mining where you deal even more damage to rocks. So that's an even bigger benefit to you just mining. If you're not a PvP type of guy and you just like to mine and craft, this is the race for you. But even still, you could have this on your second slot just to go mining, and it's going to help you out a ton trying to get those rarer ores. And yes, minus 5% movement speed, but the minus 5% movement speed isn't as big as a notice as minus 10% movement speed. I'm definitely putting this up in A tier. In my opinion, A tier. Not like Demonic or Angel race where it's up in S tier. We'll talk about later on, but this is so good. It accounts for basically 50 to 60% of the game mining and crafting. The only downside is basically no combat capabilities, but just learn how to PvP and you'll be good with that. Or just have it on your second slot. And then the second epic race is the Shadow race, coming in at a 6% chance of being pulled, and it has Phantom Step, where there's a 50% chance to turn into a shadow and dodge incoming attacks when receiving damage. And then the second passive is Shadow Pact, plus 10% attack speed, plus 50% movement speed, plus 5% physical damage, and plus 10% stamina and minus 10% health. So this is just basically the Dwarf, but instead of speccing into mining and foraging, you're just doing damage output. Like you could dodge attacks, so that's good survivability, and you gain plus 10% attack speed, plus 50% movement speed to move around the map, and plus 5% increased physical damage. Not the biggest increase, but 5% physical damage is still pretty good because it scales a lot better than luck, since with each new weapon that you create, it gets even better and better and does more damage. I'm definitely going to put that up into B tier, and if I rolled Shadow, I'd low-key replace it with the Goblin just so I can get that discount. But that's if I get a better combat race than Shadow. After that, we're finally moving into the legendary races. The first one is Minotaur, coming in at a 1.75% chance of being pulled, and it has 2 passives. Bull's Fury, receiving damage and going below 50% health will cause you to enter rage mode, increasing your movement speed and physical damage by 30%. And then the second one is Beast, plus 10% height, plus 20% health, minus 10% stamina, and then plus 20% width and depth. So this increases your hitboxes by a lot, but you do get increased health and a nice little passive where if you do get below 50% HP, you gain more speed and more damage. But the thing is, with this legendary race, I don't see a good benefit to it, because if you learn how to parry in combat, you're never going to reach below 50 health. And since this passive requires you to reach a certain requirement, you're not always going to be using it. So it's basically like an empty passive until you reach 50% health. So when you're doing normal things like mining or just wandering around, you have less stamina, you're fatter, you can't fit through places, but you're a little tankier. So in my opinion, Minotaur, it's pretty bad. I gotta put it down here. I gotta put it maybe even behind Goblin, maybe even behind Shadow in my opinion. After Minotaur, we have the Dragonborn race, coming in at a 1.5% chance of being pulled, and it has 3 passives called the Sharpened Fangs, plus 15% physical damage. That is a good start. Next one is Dragon's Breath, 40% chance to burn enemies and deal 30% of your currently equipped weapons damage per 3 seconds. That is OP. And then the third one is Durable Scales, plus 20% max HP and plus 10% height. So this is straight up just the offensive king for legendary races. I'm gonna put it up into A tier, one of the best combat races out there. I mean, I might even put it above the Dwarf just because it has so many good offensive abilities. Like you get a lot of physical damage off rip. You gain a 40% chance, which is basically 1 in 2 hits to burn enemies dealing 30% of your currently equipped weapon's damage. So if you're dealing 100 damage with your weapon, you're dealing 30 damage for 3 seconds. So 30 times 3, you're dealing 90 burn damage in 3 seconds. That is OP. Plus, you're a lot more tankier and you won't really notice the height, but you do get a little taller. Finally, we have the last legendary race, the Golem race, coming in at a 1.25% chance of being pulled, and it has 3 passives. The first one is heavy hitter, 50% attack speed for heavy weapons. The next one is tank, 30% health and size increases, but minus 10% movement speed. And then finally, Stone Heart, there's a 50% chance to reduce incoming damage by 25%. This is the best survivability race in the game. Like, you gain so much health, and then you have a 50% chance of reducing incoming damage by 25%. The only downside is that you're really big and you move really slowly. So if you want to put that to account, I'd maybe even put it like just above Minotaur, but you do swing heavy weapons like colossal weapons and long swords a lot quicker by 15%. So that could make up for offensive capabilities, putting it above Shadow. Now we're finally moving on to the mythical 0.5% angel and demon races. Let's start off with the angel race. It has 4 passives. The first one is Holy Hand. When below 20% max health, you gain infinite stamina. That pairs really well with the second passive called Wings, plus 50% dash distance, plus 15% longer dash iframes, plus 20% movement speed, plus 25% jump boost, plus 20% stamina, and then minus 20% dash cooldown. This just gets you anywhere on the map. And if you're below 20% HP, you could just spam dashes permanently. That's insanely buffed with all these buffs from the Wings passive. Really good movement right here. But that's not the only thing. The third passive is called Smite. There's a 50% chance, so 1 in 2 hits, to smite your enemies for 30% of physical damage. So all of the physical damage that you do from your weapon. And then finally, we have Mighty Clover, which just increases your luck by 50%. This stacks for both mob drops and ore drops. So overall, this is just a good utility race. Good for all categories of this game, whether it's mining, traveling, combat, so on and so forth. So we're going to place that in S tier, 100%. And then finally, we have the demon race. The first passive is Devil Finger. Dashing will cause you to teleport, conjuring hellfire particles, and having a 20% chance to summon a hellfire circle, dealing 45% of your currently equipped weapons damage per second to enemies inside the AoE for 3 seconds. So every time you dash, you have a 25% chance of summoning a circle that deals 45% of your weapon's equipped damage. Let's say you deal 100 damage with your weapon, you deal 45 damage per second in that circle AoE for the next 3 seconds. So if there's 3 mobs, they're all taking that much damage. The second one is Demonic Powers, plus 20% movement speed, plus 20% attack speed, plus 20% fire damage, and plus 30% height with depth, and plus 20% physical damage. This is a really good passive. You're moving quicker, your attacks a lot quicker, you deal more fire damage. So if you do burn, this is going to stack along with it. Your hitbox is a little wider, but you deal plus 20% even more physical damage. So this is just the peak offensive race, but it keeps getting better. The third passive is called Cursed Aura. While in combat, conjure an area around you, which deals 10% of your currently equipped damage per second. So if you're fighting something and you just stand near them, let's say your weapon deals 100 damage, you deal 10 damage per second while you're aura farming. And then finally, we have Backfire, plus 25% chance to burn enemies when receiving damage. If you get hit, you deal burn damage at a 25% chance, and then that stacks with the plus 20% fire damage. Now, I'm going to put this up into S tier, as you could already probably tell. Honestly, these are probably interswitchable. I'd rather have the angel race though, because even though the demon race has a lot of combat capabilities, the angel race just has so much movement around the map, has a plus 50% luck buff, and it can make up with the offensive capabilities with its Smite passive. So that's my tier list. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. But with that being said, I'll see you guys later. Peace.